Did you ever have to have that conversation with a colleague or a subordinate? The one where you take them aside or schedule that out of the blue one-on-one and open up the conversation with, hey, we need to talk about your performance. Well, even if you didn't yet, you might end up in a position to do so one day. In this episode of the Office Hours podcast, we're talking about giving someone negative feedback. I hope you will enjoy what is about to follow, and let's get on with it. Hello everyone, and welcome to the episode 41 of the Office Hours podcast. Today, I'm happy to welcome Mo back, and without further ado, let's get on with it. Hey Mo, how you been?
Very good. And you?
Doing rather
Very
well,
good.
you know.
There is this particular question from that we're working on, and actually, this one I'm curious about it to learn how you handle this kind of things. It's how to give critical feedback to people, and I said I'm curious about it just because in recent times I happen to have this experience where I felt I needed to give feedback to certain people, but people with more experience than myself, And um, sometimes I'm a bit indirect about it, but I'm not sure if this is actually also a good way to go about,
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you do this?
I do it poorly. In a sense that in my professional career,
Mhm.
I never had been in too many situations. Like, I always had somebody else on the team, like a manager or something of that nature, and that person's role would be the one to deliver, the bad news or corrective information or something like that. So I never really had to get my hands dirty with it, in a sense. I was always like, yeah, I'll just pretend that that entire area of professional communication just doesn't exist because I never have to do it, right? And yeah, I am now closer to that state where I have to sometimes give people feedback and give people more, I guess, well, I have to give them critical feedback, and sometimes it might be a little bit harsh feedback. And I'm just too nice, which doesn't work because you just dance around the issue. You never fully broach it. You never be like, hey, what you're doing is just crap and let's figure out ways of improving it. Or some other things. It's like, I just tend to let things slide on a more personal level, even to the detriment of myself and the other person, right? And
Okay.
it almost
Mhm.
it's, to some degree, it's just like politeness, because it is interpreted as being rude if you criticize somebody, even if it's deserved, right? So I don't know. It almost feels like I need like a training exercise to go with someone through it and just deliver the bad news. It's not necessarily even bad news. It's more of a if you're dissatisfied with some aspect of someone's performance or other aspects of their professional demeanor, not telling them is bad for both parties, I would feel. And I guess the question is how to tell them in a way that they don't take it badly, as in they now hold a grudge against you, or they think you're an asshole or whatever. That the criticism has to be valid, as in it actually covers some provable aspect of their behavior. And
Yeah.
they have to also recognize, because there's situations where people think that they're such a
Mhm.
rock star that it's not even being seen as a negative on their part. They take it as a confirmation of how awesome they are. So
So yeah. You see, there is one particular person that I work with right now. He does it in a way. Say, for example, and okay, earlier this week, I saw someone tweet something saying "Oh, if you she was saying talking about how outspoken she is, and she's not always afraid to put out content. And the reason for this is because she's a developer and she has gone through a series of code reviews. And if you have other people judge your code, and give you feedback, like you probably train yourself to accept to not care much about what people say. Anyway, so I guess like I was just thinking, I just remembered this while I was thinking about this person that I work with. So for him, he he does something quite interesting that he would share how he would do this thing.
Yeah.
Say, for example, he's not really saying like, oh, you should do it this way, but he will give his opinion.
Yeah.
No, like his idea,
Yeah.
share his idea, like, okay, this is how I will do it.
Yeah.
And you could see it and you could consider to like, if you find it interesting, you could use it, but otherwise it's not really gonna
Yeah.
block.
Yeah.
But I noticed like also sometimes when people give feedback, I'm speaking specifically from like pull requests now. I think sometimes it's like an opportunity to outshine the person, to show yourself that, yeah, I I could do this better than you sometimes. But like, because I say this because sometimes the people who give the most critical feedback, like the most feedbacks on pull requests, actually happen to always have like a lot of defects on their PRs too. And then you wonder, like,
Mm.
the ideas you had on other people's pull requests when you were doing the reviews, how come you don't have the same energy when you do yours? Right?
Well,
But
yeah.
yeah.
So I think in terms of code review and PRs, I have that same strategy because again, it's like a very non-confrontational strategy of, I mean, okay, if there's something that is obviously bad, and that is not according to our standard, you know, you can just be very plain about it. But in terms of approach, it's like, here's how I would do it. Yeah, fair enough. I do that often too because I think it's also educational. And if people
Yeah.
might interpret it as if you're trying to just one up them, well, people like that are going to have that interpretation regardless of what you do. So it's useless to try to cater
No.
to that, right?
Yeah.
It's like I'm
Yeah.
putting it out there because this is legitimately what I think. Like I don't care if you think that I'm trying to one up you. The culture in our team and the atmosphere in our team does not indicate in any way that this is going to be received like this.
Mm.
And if you
Okay.
have a sense that this might be received like this, then there's something busted with the team culture and something else needs to be done because the problem lies elsewhere, right? It's not necessarily
Okay.
criticism, it's just the nature of the players on a team that are not really meshing too well with the other people. Because if you have
Yeah.
a good culture, people would actually appreciate it,
Mm-hmm.
that they see it as educational and not as just like, hey, this is better because I said so, right? And
Yeah.
the only time where it can kind of, it's interesting too, is like if you create solutions that you can just press a button to apply to the code right away.
Suggestions.
Suggestions, exactly. Thank you. I guess in our team we just say, you know what, like there's not going to be too much conversation about it. For most part, the suggestions are reserved for something that is just obviously not correct. So just apply it and move on and remember that thing. So it's not to be considered some passive aggressive type deal where it's like, yeah, here's my
Mm.
suggestion, like this is what you should have done. No, it's just to
Mm-hmm.
save time. You just press the button and move on with the rest of the code review. But I guess the question originally, as it stated, is like, how do you deliver critical feedback to people? It's not just about code reviews. It's about other
Yeah. True.
aspects of their life,
True.
right? And code reviews makes it easy because, well, first of all, it's also impersonal. You're leaving a comment on a thread, which has its benefits and it has its drawbacks. Because again, it's very hard to read intent and tone through text off a page, right? Like you can't read sarcasm from a text on a page unless the author is like a master word craftsman and can actually convey
Yeah.
specifically that it is to be received sarcastically, right? I think people like they crank the emotional interpretation of things in way overdrive when they're reading things according to their current mood and state of mind. because two people can read the same sentence of a comment on some thread, on some code review, and one people will think that the person is mocking them and the other person will think something completely different, right? So again, so that's the bad part of it. The good part of it is that you just put it on a page and then they read it. It's not like they're staring you in the face and you have to be like, oh, did I offend this guy or did I say something he didn't like? Like, oh, I have to really watch what I'm saying. I mean, you still have to watch what you're saying in a sense, but because there's that degree of separation between the people, it may make some things easier to be said. And you can also be using the language of, just deflecting and using like according to the standard, you're not supposed to, like you're just shifting all of the responsibility from yourself to something else. And again, that deflects a lot of it from you personally. So there's again that disconnect between you being the bearer of bad news and a person taking them directly as a, criticism of their character as opposed to the criticism of what they produced. So you kind of have to watch out. But in person, like if you're having a one-on-one with someone, like let's say somebody's not performing to their, maybe not even to their ability. Maybe that is their ability, who knows? But like they're not performing up to the standard. Like how do you deliver that? It's like, how do you say, you're not doing things, quickly enough or with enough quality? And then importantly, like, where do you go from there? Because like I can tell you, oh, hey, you're doing this thing poorly. And what's that person supposed to do after receiving that knowledge? If you don't tell them also what you expect or how you expect that thing to change, and if they're willing to change it or if they're not willing to change it, and if they're saying like, yeah, I'll improve, and then completely ignore it because like, there's tons of outcomes there too. And my current manager tells me just tell it like it is. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't try to dance around it. Just deliver the news and kind of go from there. And I sense that this is the right way of doing things because it's not, in a very famous phrase, it's nothing personal. It's just business, right? It is ultimately nothing personal. I think if you have a negative disposition toward that person, just through other reasons. A bunch of podcasts ago, I don't remember which one specifically, but when I was talking about my mentorship career, it was like I had to provide mentorship services to people that annoyed me on a personal level, right? Which definitely colors the interaction a certain way because it's like if you don't like how the person behaves, like something about them just like rubs you the wrong way. Or they just annoy you, or I don't know, various spectrum of emotion you can experience when, looking at some other person, So if that is also part of it, I think that makes it much worse because you have to be like that much more professional not to let it leak through for them to detect it. Because if they do detect it, then they would immediately say, this is personal. He's just has an axe to grind, and now all of these reasons are pulled in to justify all the bad things this person's thinking about me, right? Like you can also interpret it in that way. And I understand that this is likely the right way of doing things because ultimately I have, if not the person's best interest at heart, but definitely my own and the team's in conjunction. Because like if I have to spend extra time or if the team as a team can't deliver at the same pace because this person is dragging everyone down, maybe I don't have the capability to like carry them for an extended period of time to get them to the skills that they need to be, a productive contributing member of the team, right? Maybe the business just can't afford it. So the best thing for myself and for the team is just to be like, sorry, this is not working out, right? Like it was a hiring mistake in a sense that you should have had those skills coming through the door. And as much as we'd like to train you to that level, we just don't have the opportunity to do so right now. Or you may be in a situation where it's something that you can actually remediate, But then, you know, a lot of people who've been through big companies, especially the nature of like Amazon's and the like, where you get placed on PIP, you know, like the performance improvement plan or whatever.
Mhm.
And that's basically their way of telling you that you're out the door, and this is just a pro forma thing that they have to legally supply you with. It's like, hey, we tried getting this guy to clean up his act and he failed, therefore, you know, letting him go was only reasonable conclusion. Because like the requests they put on the PIP, you know, it's like the, what's the name? Like the 12 Herculean tasks, bordering on impossible. You know, it's like if you do all of those things, then you know you get the half of the kingdom and king's daughter's hand at the same time, and you get to keep your job. So I don't know. I kind of meandered all the way someplace else, but yeah.
At least there's a plan. The thing, like, so I understand, like, when you tell someone, but I guess my first question is, have you ever had to deliver this type of news? And the reason why I'm asking is because, first, I think it depends on the person. I think one thing about being a manager is that you have to understand the members of the team. And understanding the members of the team maybe include like everyone's personality, because some people want the direct way, like say exactly what you're thinking, I can handle it. Meanwhile, I don't know if some people, based on their personality type, might not be able to handle direct, and they might feel attacked. And when someone feels attacked, they get into defensive mode, and whatever you're saying after that, they're not really listening. They're just now looking at you like an enemy. I mean, that's why I'm wondering, like, if it's always the good approach to tell it as it is. I think being a manager means like also taking the character of each of the team members into cognizance, like getting to understand as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to know what you think about this.
Yeah, I think that coddling people is not a good strategy in general. Like, if you're a professional, you should be able to handle reasonable criticism of your performance. Like, what does it mean? You know, like, if there's unreasonable criticism or your performance, again, a lot of these things are kind of up to interpretation, right? Like, what one person considers reasonable and unreasonable is as good as guess as any. And I think that's why, you know, all the classical firings and letting goes are like, hey, this is a person from HR, you're being let go, the decision is final, there's nothing you can do about it, they're gonna guide you through the next steps, blah, 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 have a nice day. So there's like just this surgical, just like snip, GTFO, right? But that's like the final extreme of that entire progression, right? But it is done very kind of equally. Like, nobody's gonna, if you're being fired for real, nobody's gonna be there and be like, oh, you poor thing, I feel really bad for you. It's like, no, you're fired, have a nice day, you know? There's just like no point in wasting any extra time.
Yeah, but that's not feedback. That's like decision delivery.
Right, that's not feedback. That's a fair point. You are correct there. But I think that if you're not, so there's two sides to this thing. There's the person delivering the feedback, and then there's the person receiving the feedback, and they both can have different interpretations of validity of the claims. So that's a good thing to have, is very concrete, provable things where you have steps to remediate those things.
Yeah. Okay.
Because like, you can come in and say, hey, I'm really not happy about your performance this month. What the fuck does that even mean?
Exactly.
Right? And the thing is too, is like, if the person is underperforming and feels like they are underperforming, they'd be like, oh yeah, I guess I can agree. I've been feeling kind of down lately. I haven't been up to my tasks. They can spin out the rest of that thread themselves, right? But if a person thinks they're doing a good job, it's like, well, what the hell do you mean by that, right? I think I've been like working on tasks and closing tickets and attending meetings, and like, yeah, the project is slipping, but there's like various reasons for that. It cannot be all directly attributed to me. So this is the part that kind of gets tricky, is like, if the person already understands, why they're being called to have the unfortunate conversation, right? So yeah, like I haven't really been in a situation, to your previous question. I have been in a situation where I should have delivered criticism, but I didn't do it the way that I should have done it. It was more of a like, meandering, kind of wishy-washy, not willing to offend anyone's feelings, and yada yada yada. And I think it didn't really work, because again, there's nothing concrete, measurable about it with the steps to possible improvement. It was more of a like, we kind of, you could do like, so it was not good. And that's why I'm saying like I don't do it too well, because I haven't had the experience to kind
Yeah.
of just go, like, I think you have to go through it a bunch of times. It's like, uh, it's almost the same psychological mechanism as like dealing with rejection. There's this whole 100 days of rejection. It's like a challenge where you basically habituate yourself to being told no to various things. And it has like tasks like, go to a coffee shop and get them to give you a coffee for free. And things of that nature, right? Because 99% of the time, they're just going to say no. And the whole point of it is like you do it consistently to be told no, so that you're not afraid of being told no in other situations. So in this case, it's like similar. It's like you have to have like 100 day of delivering critical feedback to random people, so that when it matters, you're not going to be like all too overly polite and doing the wrong thing for everyone involved.
Yeah. I think I agree with this, like especially with the last point, because maybe it requires training too,
Mm-hmm.
because for you to give a good feedback, you also need to be able to have trained yourself to receive it. I don't know. Anyway, I'm just thinking about it. I'm trying to understand like the plan, because I used to have a position like this, like before I moved to Canada, and I was I had like the opportunity to give like not an opportunity, the position, the responsibility to give feedback to people, because I was like the manager in the team. And but I was younger then. So I would give it like, like I'm afraid to hurt your feelings, like just I mean, which is expected because I didn't have a lot of experience then. And now I noticed that maybe I still might opt for this idea. And I was still wondering if, because one of the things that I learned from that experience was like, I feel if I could understand every member of the team, because I know right now in each team, everyone is different. I worked for a company here, an ERP company in Montreal, and I had a conversation with the CEO because we were talking about personality type. He recommended a book to me. It's How to Win and Influence
How
Friends.
to
I
Win
think
Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
exactly,
Very,
exact that
very,
book.
very famous book.
Yeah, so he recommended the book to me because we were talking about personality types. He realized that um when I talk to people, like in just casual conversations, I could be very like direct, like I just say exactly what I was thinking, not directly like that, but what I'm trying to say, like just I don't like try to like go the famous Canadian way, like being polite about it, you know. And some people on the team at the time felt a bit uncomfortable about it, and I had to learn how to like, talk to people based on their actual personality type. So I know some people who get offended quickly about certain conversations, so I just would say things to them a bit softly. And even though I know the point I'm hitting, I'll probably just like, hit that point, but hit it gently.
Hmm.
You know, like if I want to tell you that you could have done something better, I probably would have asked you, how would you have done this if you had to do it differently? You know,
Yeah,
something like
I
this.
guess I hear what you're saying, but I think what I also learned is that you can deliver all that in a nice way and kind of, be like all polite and maybe not like overly polite and still deliver the message you're trying to deliver without trying to hurt anyone's feelings. But then the other thing too is if it's not accompanied with very explicit consequences to what is going to happen if they don't perform that change, then it's kind of useless too. Because I remember like, oh, you're constantly being late. How do you think that makes me feel? You're like trying to appeal that they're surrounded by people who might not appreciate a person being late, and maybe they just don't give a shit about how other people feel. It's like, I'm late. Like if you don't like it, that's your problem, not mine. Whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if the consequence is like you're late 3 more times again this month and you're fired, that's very harsh and direct and kind of to the point. But then like there's a very clear expectation. It's like, I don't care about people's feelings that you might hurt or whatever, or that you have to appreciate their feelings when you're late and that affects their work. It's like, no, if you're late, you're gone, right? I mean, obviously it's like a very contrived example, but that's kind of the point I'm trying to make. Like if there's no consequences for them staying on the same path that they're on, all of that is effectively, it's like, yeah, I'll take it under advisement and decide whether I want to make changes to that aspect of my life or not. But the whole point is, if you have to deliver that critical feedback, it is affecting the team and a company and a product at some level. So that is unacceptable.
Yeah.
Like the point, like, okay, I can maybe give you feedback to help you grow, but I can also give you feedback because, hey, you're slowing us down.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
I guess there are different types of feedback. I guess it depends on the type of feedback. Because while you were saying this, I read something um a while ago. It was about the difference between, like, the Gen X, millennials, and like Gen Zs. Apparently, for the Gen X, they do the direct approach. You do this or you are gone. And I feel like as it goes down the levels, like especially at the Gen Zs now, it was observed that you don't say things like this, or else you're gonna have a lot of turnovers. Because the moment you start saying like, oh yeah, if you don't do this, like, well, they
But
could leave and find another job, and now you would lose the company would be losing money on hiring, and also now you need to spend some more time
yeah, but
to hire a new person
it's
just because.
while those things are true, and I used to think that way. It's like, oh, hiring a new person is more expensive than training the current person. It's one thing when you need to train somebody in a particular skill that they don't have, but things like punctuality and other aspects of someone's personality, in a sense, I don't know if it's a skill. Like you can probably have some corrective measures applied at some point, but ultimately, I used to be notoriously 5 minutes late all the time for everything. Just like 2-3 minutes, just not nothing like too crazy, but
Mhm,
starting from school days and further
mhm,
into my career, just
mhm.
just a little bit late every time. And for the longest time, it was just part of the personality, effectively. And then eventually, after developing other professional qualities, that thing kind of got much better too. Like, but it's not like people can train you to be punctual. It's like, oh yeah, just consider that you might have to, like, you're either yourself punctual or you're not, and maybe you can develop that on your own. But again, it's not for your employer's It's not their responsibility for you to have the professional aspects of your personality to work in a professional environment, right? So when people say, oh, yeah, that increases turnover. Yeah, but if you're getting rid of bad employees, is high turnover a bad thing or a good thing? Like if you hire somebody better, like is it a net win or a net loss that like you have to spend money on hiring and like I think like okay, so now that I'm thinking about it a little more, if you had to like let's say you had to let somebody go because they were constantly late and you need to hire a replacement for that person, but you haven't made any adjustments to how you do hiring, then having high turnover is going to happen and it's going to be bad because you're not learning any lessons out of it. But if you made adjustments to your hiring process to filter more carefully for that aspect, you have a chance of getting somebody better, and as a result the whole thing becomes better. So you can't just justify it by saying like, oh, now we have to hire and train people and give them time to onboard, because otherwise you're going to keep an underperforming person who's constantly late and driving everyone nuts for what? I'm pretty sure
Okay.
that that's an easily quantifiable. You can arrive at some sort of dollar number at which point it financially starts to make sense to fire them as soon as possible rather than holding on to them, right?
You know, I agree with this, but to some extent,
Okay.
because and I want to share why. And I think each business would have to measure like what is the reason. Because if you hire someone else and you change, for sure, to be honest, like I think for sure you have to change your hiring tactic if being on time is one very important part of your business. And for example, if you work in a very strict kind of like scenario, like everyone has a shift, for example, and you being late affects other people and the business somewhere, this is different. But if you work in a place where you could afford, as long as like you are up to your meetings and like it could not be that much of an issue, you know, as long as maybe you make up for it or so. Anyway, this is a different scenario. However, I noticed like there are two things, right? In my from my own point of view, I think personality types and also some people might have, and I say this to sound like a Gen Z. I'm not Gen Z. It's just like I understand some of the thought process. Some people have like a personality um anxiety when it comes to timing. So like if you tell someone like, oh yeah, you have to be there at 6 o'clock, so they're probably anxious about this. And
Honestly, not my problem. Like if they have to be there at 6, I don't give a shit that they're anxious. Like that's really not my problem. I can say, well,
yeah,
oh yeah, let's put everything on pause because so and so is anxious that they have to be there on time. Like no,
I'm
get out
getting to
of
a point.
here with that.
I'm getting to a point. I'm getting to a point, yeah. But I think you could have, there could be other reasons too, you know, maybe like some family issues or like some personal
Well,
problems.
it's one thing when it's justifiable, right?
Exactly.
But
That's what I'm
like
getting to.
you can't have family issues every other day. Or rather, if you do have family issues every other day, then just add 20 extra minutes to your commute and be freaking on time. If it's a
I
predictable
get it.
thing that you can work
Yeah.
around, you can work around it.
Hmm.
Like, it's just, otherwise, it's just coming up with excuses.
True. You know what? I think it's true. I think at the end of the day, everyone has to take responsibility for their actions
Yeah.
and understand the consequence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
at this point, I think I agree with like being direct about it. Um, Maybe it could just be too complicated if you have to try to understand personality types to deliver critical news. I think people should understand the business too. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's like
yeah. So
I'm spinning way too many plates already to also keep track of everyone's mood and the phase of the moon and how the feng
yeah,
shui flows, the
yeah,
chi flows through the
yeah,
room to
yeah,
account
it's
for
a
all of
normal.
these things to give somebody some bad news. It is ultimately it is a professional environment, and criticisms pertaining to your performance of your duties are to be expected in some ways welcome. Like we had our 360s recently, right? And when I was talking to my manager about him, she said like, "Oh yeah, people said a lot of good things, but they had some criticisms too." I'm like, "Okay, I want to hear all the bad things." Because good things is it's nice to be, patted on the back for all the right things you're doing, but like I want to learn all of the things that I'm not doing right so I can actually, like, it's hard to become really good at what you're already good at, but if somebody says that you're not doing something well enough, that's like a low-hanging fruit. Like you can just go for that and fix it, and then everything else improves, right? So like, forget the good news. It's fine. Like it's nice. It's nice to hear that people generally enjoy working with you and all of these things. Like let me know the bad stuff so I can work on it. And if people don't have that attitude in their professional duties, they're never going to grow. So like, critical feedback or not, if they don't welcome it, it's a path it's a trend in a very bad direction to me.
Yeah.
So you have to adjust your attitude toward getting critical feedback. Like if there's legit, valid critical feedback, you should just you should yearn for it. You should just gobble it up and be like, okay, awesome. Now I know what I need to do. If you're constantly shielding yourself and it's always somebody else's fault or this or that or my generation always is offended about these things, it's like, forget about it. Like, just forget about it.
Listen, if you work along with like Gen Z or like this,
God
the younger
forbid.
people, what do you mean?
The civilization.
What is it good for me though?
No, I'm just kidding. I don't, to be okay. It's like that Chris Pratt meme. It's like, I don't really know. And at this point, I'm afraid to ask. Like Gen Z, which one is that exactly? Is that is that the after millennials, right?
Yeah, the post millennials.
Yeah, I don't know. I hear a lot of things from a lot of people about the overall work ethic of that generation, and maybe that's why I instinctively say God forbid, because it's like I don't want to deal with any of their bullshit, to be honest with you, because like, oh man, I don't know.
I mean, it's a lot of interesting reports, and yeah, it is what it is. Like,
it is what it is.
It is what it is, I guess. But I think I agree finally. Like, you have to adapt to certain news and also understand like the feedback is good for your development. Like you said, the good things.
But it does have to be valid and actionable. It can't just be wishy-washy. Oh, I don't really like what you're doing, because that's useless.
Yeah. All right then. Thank you, Vasily. I really appreciate this conversation. It was really nice. I've learned a new thing today. Thank you. And thank you, Peony, for the question.
Awesome. So Peony is my manager. So she knows what she's talking about. I think that question wasn't really posed as a question, but rather a sneaky way for me to think about it and come to my conclusions so I can deliver proper feedback in my duties as a team lead. Yeah, see, it's like the 4D chess that she's playing. So
she's probably watching, right?
Probably. Well, I'll have to forward this to her and see what she has to say. So, hi, Peony.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for sticking with us. I hope you found something that was interesting in this conversation, and I hope we'll see you in the next one. Thank you, and have a great day.